Good morning, everybody. It is March 16th, the day before St. Patty's Day. If you're watching this when we release it, which we release every Wednesday, like clockwork, whether we need to or not. But in full disclosure, we have gone to a new format of recording a couple days before. So as we're speaking and recording, it is Monday night for us. But when you're seeing this, if you're seeing this, air quotes, live, it is Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock-ish if Christian gets it started on time. Just kidding. Just kidding. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for watching and tuning in. This is Coffee Pan Dulce, and we've got my partner in crime, Christian. We have Barb Bacon and our esteemed guest, Dr. B. I don't even know if you're a guest anymore. I think you're an honorary.
a semi-regular.
That's right.
Host, all things medical, and a healthcare for all, a Medicare for all advocate, and just and I think also you play the banjo now too, don't you?
You want to? Yeah, I can give you a little tune here during the break.
Absolutely.
Hey, you know we should have had Dr.
That, you know,
yeah, we should have had Dr. B play us in.
Yes, yes. We definitely have to have that. I would have been serenaded by Dr. B.
I don't know any Pan Dulce kind of songs. These are all kind of redneck hillbilly songs. Is all I know.
Yeah.
I'll have to learn one.
I got to write this. Yeah, I got to write that down because I do have to remember to say something. So, welcome everyone. As Jenny said, welcome to Coffee Pan Dulce. My name is Christian Cano, one of your co-hosts, along with Jenny Gunn, Barb Bacon, who's joining us tonight, and Mama Ruth. We are Mama Ruthless tonight. We have a wonderful show tonight, our third show in March. We have 5 shows in the wonderful month of March. And we want to thank those who are joining us on Facebook Live, but also those who join us on YouTube, Facebook later, and also on our audio platforms, like audio podcast platforms like iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Amazon Music, Spotify, and whatever you decide to join us on. So with that said, we do want to thank everyone who's joining us. And it looks like we're going to have to postpone some of the guests that were going to be with us tonight. And so, Jenny, let's go ahead and start introducing. I just got a message as we're speaking, another message. So, Jenny, why don't we go ahead and start introducing yourself and any imaginary button so I can respond back to this.
Live and off the presses. Good morning, everybody. Again, I am Jenny-Jaymes Gunn, a local LGBT advocate. I work with Charlotte Pride, the LGBT Chamber of the Carolinas, and several other organizations. I also am a board member of the National Organization for Women. Many of my causes that capture my heart: gun sense laws, moms demand action, of course, healthcare for all. I mean, I don't even know how you can even debate that, considering we've just gone through a 2-year plus pandemic and it's definitely not over yet. I mean, it's like a public utility. It's like electric and water and sewer. Like, to me, healthcare just would go along with that, for some reason. Like we electrified the rural areas. Why don't we healthcare up everybody for the entire country? Like, it seems like a no-brainer. We always give it to our military. Doesn't it make sense to just give it to everybody? I mean, it's kind of stupid. But anyway, I talked way too long. But Dr. B, how are you doing? Tell us about you.
Doing great. Good to get back. And curiously, Saturday a week ago, I drove down to Houston to speak to a group of Texas neurosurgeons at their annual meeting on Medicare for All. And you say, why didn't it make common sense? Well, you'd just be amazed the reasons these folks kind of have for thinking this is not a good idea. And then that makes sense. They're all more ideological than practical. But it's kind of astounding, the anxiety that something like Medicare for All provokes in people. So anyway, I understand that on some levels, but it's still discouraging. So I'm George Bonefalk, retired neurosurgeon, and my primary causes are Medicare for All, and in the last couple of years, anti-racism. And for a long time, the first cause I ever did a protest march in was Mothers Against Guns, or Mother Against Gun Violence, whatever. So yeah, certainly I'm all for those things, but particularly my primary advocacy is Medicare for All.
Hi there, I'm Barb Bacon. I'm a community advocate here in South Charlotte. I say healthcare for all because I have many friends that kind of freak out about Medicare for all, and I'm tired of trying to explain it to them. So I agree. Everybody deserves healthcare. I just recently, with my boyfriend, attended a 213-mile marathon trying to raise money for post-traumatic stress syndrome veterans. We are now up to 22 suicides a day by our vets. Our veterans healthcare is failing. They can't even get appointments for therapy. It's really bad. So this is a local Virginia Beach area and all of North Carolina. These are Marines and active and inactive. And in one weekend, we raised $5,000, and it's immediately going to help give them therapy. And that's a start. So anyway, that's a new focus for me, but I wear my little button all the time and everybody's asking me what it's for, but it's really heartbreaking. So that's all for me.
That's wonderful. Wow. Well, how do I follow that? Hey everyone, I'm Christian Cano, your other co-host. My buttons are healthcare for all, Medicare for all, Moms for Action, gun sense legislation, and also in my heart on behalf of Joe Oldham, who educated us and taught us a lot about Black Lives Matter. So with that said, we do have another guest who's joining us. And Barb, Jenny, you want to introduce her, who our other person is? And maybe she can introduce herself while we're doing introductions.
Of course, the subject of tonight is one of our favorite subjects. We've talked about COVID and vaccines and many other things, but our guest, and I do believe she's from Texas, which is Christian and I's home state. Hi, Lydia. How are you?
Hi, I'm actually from Canada. Heather's from Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's even better.
The thing that happens that I always am afraid of is getting time zones mixed up. And I was like an hour off, and I'm so sorry. That's why I look rushed and just.
That's okay. Well, that's okay. I know that the other guest we're going to have wasn't able to join us, but please introduce yourself, and then we'll go into our topics as well. But we're going around introducing yourself.
Sure. My name is Lydia Greene, and I'm from Alberta, Canada. I wrote an article last year called 12 Years Ago, it was called, I was an anti-vaxxer for 12 years, and then I changed my mind. That was the first time I had ever written about my journey leaving anti-vax behind. And it was pretty well received. And I just started to go through a lot of my anti-medicine beliefs, and just kind of deconstructing that whole journey. I ran into Heather Simpson, and she had a pretty similar story to mine, but different. And I said, we should start something for people like us that are coming out of this anti-vax wellness. And it feels like we left a cult in a lot of ways. And so you kind of need a lot of support coming back from that. And so that's what we've started with Back to the Vax, is just interviewing doctors to address some of the tropes that we believed so wholeheartedly, a support group for parents, not only just to start vaccinating, but vaccinate with confidence so that, they can do it while believing they're doing the best thing for their child and the best thing for their community. And, just kind of exposing that frame of mind that we had so people can kind of understand maybe where we came from and how to confront vaccine hesitancy.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We're going to dig deeper into that. But before we do that, only because we have to follow traditions here, which we never do, I do want to salute to our neighbors who are watching us on a Wednesday morning. Salute to whatever you're drinking this morning. I'm drinking coffee. And no, it's not anything in it, just coffee. And also, we do want to thank our Pan Dulce sponsor and supplier, Manolo's Bakery here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Manolo's Bakery, please visit and support your Black and Brown or any small business during this global pandemic. I also want to let you know that Manolo's has some great conchas that are with the colors of Ukraine. I forgot to get one, but and so he's done a lot of great things like the King's Cakes, where donations went to the Ukraine Relief Fund. He always does a lot of wonderful things. So Manolo's Bakery here in Charlotte, North Carolina, please, or visit any small business in your area. So with that said, I think, Jenny, can we go ahead and skip the?
I think since our guest made it onto the show,
sure. Okay.
Normally we do an in the news segment, and it's usually because it's just Christian and I a lot of the time, and so we
need to fill
it up in segments.
We need to fill time.
Otherwise, when Christian gets real boring, I'm very interesting, but Christian, on the other hand, an hour of him
Met us, you guys.
is dangerous for our viewers. Okay, and dangerous for our ratings. Just kidding. I love him like a brother that I don't want to have. But anyway.
Yeah, Jen, real quickly, before we let you get started here, I just want to let you know that we received an email 2 weeks ago from a gentleman from Florida, and he wanted to remind us that we were mispronouncing pan dulce. He said that apparently I must have said pan dulce, and you say pan dulce, and sometimes we different. The correct way to pronounce pan dulce is pan dulce. So I just want to make sure that there aren't any people upset at us because we pronounce it. So I'm from Texas. I pronounce it pan dulce. So
I pronounce it tasty, very, very, very tasty. Manolo's food is phenomenally tasty. And all I know is when we used to do the show in person. So the origin of the show, just real quick, we used to meet around a little Christian's kitchen table type thing.
Yeah.
And so that's how this kind of got started. And so I'd wolf down 2 or 3 of those. Barbara would always grab the pig because we reserved that for her because that's her favorite. Yeah. And I would gain 2 or 3 pounds in one setting every Wednesday morning. And so that's how that went. So I got a little bit of instant weight loss the moment we went remote. So that was not a bad thing. But before we get into the deep dive of the topic that everybody's waiting for, we are going to take a short little break and we'll be right back.
Now, you might need to explain during the break to Lydia what pan dulces are. I don't think they're big things up in Canada, up in the North Territory there. They're kind of like a Hispanic sweet version of poutine.
That's right.
Okay, does that help?
Right. Yes. Okay, hold on, y'all. Everyone pause for 15 seconds so we can do this break. All right, just pause. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching our Coffee Pan Dulce show every week. Don't forget you can watch us visually on our video podcast platforms on Facebook and YouTube. But you can also listen to us on your favorite audio podcast platforms like Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and all of the other ones that your favorite, whatever your favorite is. Once again, thank you for watching us on Coffee Pan Dulce. We'll dance out. Well, thank you. Welcome back. And yes, so as Dr. B mentioned, pan dulce is a generic term for sweetbread or pastries. Yes. So it depends on what nationality or what tradition you come from. Like Mexican traditions, some of ours are like conchas. This is a concha, which is just a kind of a puffy pastry. Some Central America, South American pastries are a little bit different, and Cuban pastries. So it's just kind of a generic term for pan dulce, but however you want to pronounce it, they're just delicious.
I would have said dulce. I don't know why.
That's what Jenny says.
In my head, that's what it shows as. And I don't know why.
Okay, sorry.
Basically, the inner foodie of me always wanted to say it's coffee and donuts. Like that's what it is. Most of them are a Latinx or Mexican donut. That's what I grew up on in San Antonio, and I never knew how to pronounce it, but I can sure start to figure those down. I can just tell you. I don't remember in my life not eating those. But anyway, I'm super excited to have you on, Lydia, and mainly because I think it's so fascinating, and we talk about religion on here a lot. and in full disclosure, and really breaking cycles and breaking, different. I hate to call a religion cult, but in a lot of ways, a lot of things where you have a single-mindedness, and no matter what kind of facts are presented to you, you're like, oh no, I still believe in flat Earth society or whatever comes down the pike. But I'd love to ask you a question, and it's not a loaded question, but kind of what got you out of curiosity, what got you down the path of being anti-vax first, before we ask what broke you loose from it, but what was the concern, or what led you down that rabbit hole that got you into the anti-vax movement? Because I know it's quite long.
Yes, and Lydia, before you start that, I just want to remind people the name of our topic, in case, because I can't remember if I said that. So today's show's topic is Back to Vax, Anti-Vax parents turning pro-vax. And I saw this organization, your group, Back to Vax. I saw the group. I believe it was on. I think I may have read about it on CNN or NPR or one of those groups. It may have even been Texas Monthly. I can't remember. It was one of those groups, and I was so fascinated because anyone who watches this show, especially for the last 3 years, but especially since the pandemic started, and Dr. B has been on this, our biggest concern in the Latinx community has been misinformation. Why aren't people taking this? And there's a lot of people who just naturally were concerned about getting vaccinated. And we've been talking about that for a lot. So that's why this was important. So Jenny, thank you for asking that question. And Lydia, if you don't mind doing that. And then I don't know if Dr. B or Barbara has a question as well.
Right. So what led me down the anti-vax path? I'll clarify that I actually had a background in science. I used to be a quality control chemist for a pharmaceutical company before I had kids. And so I always thought of myself as a pro-science person. I got pregnant with my husband. We moved to a different town to start our family, and I wanted to be a stay-at-home mother. And I had my daughter, and I had a hard time breastfeeding her, and I felt pressured into having a C-section, which kind of made me, feel on guard around medical people. And I also have Crohn's disease, which I've had since I was 18, which also has its own trauma and history as well with me. And when my daughter, when it was time for her first set of vaccines, because we don't do any at birth here in Canada, so she was 2 months old, and I just remember having some trepidation, and I don't know why. I don't remember at the time hearing anything, maybe in passing, but not, I had no real reason in my head. Just all I remember thinking is, once I do this, I can't undo it. And I voiced my concerns to my husband, and he said, let's just go through it. Anyway, because why would they hurt babies? Why? And I was like, yeah, you're right. So she got 3 vaccines that day. I brought her home, and later that evening, she started crying this long, protracted cry, and then sleeping really deep sleeps. And I had a really hard time nursing her. She didn't want to eat. And this lasted, all night into the next day. And I called the health nurse to report what was happening. And she just kind of blew me off as a first-time parent, being too worried, and it was probably nothing. And if I was super worried, that, kind of challenging me on if you're really worried, you'll take her to the ER kind of thing. And I just remember feeling kind of dumb, talked down to, and just embarrassed, and a whole bunch of feelings. So I go back to the same forum, which at the time I was on was called Mothering, which is pretty old school. This is 2008. So forums were more big than social media, Facebook. And they're like, yeah, your daughter had a DTaP cry. Do you know what that is? It's in the inserts. And I was like, what is that? And oh, it's thought to be caused by encephalitis. Your daughter probably had.
No, we lost her.
Brain swelling, and that's why she was in so much pain. And I was just like, what? And you finally have this answer for why your baby was suffering so much, and you were freaking out about it. And at first I was just not going to do DTaP again and just do the other vaccines. But after a while, being in this group of mothers that, they took me in, they helped me get through breastfeeding troubles. They helped me recover from my C-section. So that you build these like bonds of like trial by fire, so to speak, as a new mom who's also lost her identity as, a chemist and all this stuff. Like, so there's so much at play when mothers, join these groups and become anti-vax or shun, science evidence-based practice. So that's how I got involved in it all those years ago. And I had 2 more kids, didn't vaccinate them. And then COVID hit. And that's when I really had to rethink some things. So
it sounds like there was some, I don't know if you want to call it PTSD or trauma or some challenges, plus the hormone rush of pregnancy and post-pregnancy and postpartum. And I mean, there's a lot there, and I know, from just raising 3 kids and what my ex went through after having babies and things like that. And it's a lot. And so, I think that group taking in probably gave you almost like a support group in a lot of ways.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I've heard this from, some people that were anti-vax for a long time, and then on different Reddit forums and stuff like that, I've heard similar stories to that. They typically were young parents or young moms, sometimes fitness trainers, sometimes, what I'd call like health people, doing a lot of vitamins, a lot of that type of thing. And it all came back to the same thing, a mild distrust relating to maybe a trauma with a medical personnel that just kind of spun out of control a little bit, and is actually very, very logical and understandable, because being a mama bear, you're going to protect your kids first. Like that just is a natural reaction, kind of like or something,
Hey, Jen, I want to ask Dr. B a question. Dr. B, hearing this, and thank you, first of all, for being back on our show, and everything that we've talked about over the last 2 years. And I know Barbara is from the pharmaceutical industry, so it was interesting when you said that, because I immediately looked at Barbara. Dr. B, does this, what do you think? I mean, does this sound like?
It's totally understandable, and I'm very sympathetic to your experience, Lydia, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. Let me ask you before we get started, what did you do about your 2nd and 3rd children with vaccines?
I didn't vaccinate them at all. And I look back now, because I've done a lot of investigating on the tropes that I believed. And with my daughter, had it been explained, in the moment, it's a localized pain reaction that happens to babies that age. DTaP is a tetanus shot. That shot in an adult is very painful. And in an infant can be very painful too. Like, my daughter was only 6 pounds at birth, maybe 9 pounds at her 2-month visit. She was a very tiny baby, and that needle going into the thigh, like that can cause like a lot of pain for a tiny child. And I'm not saying that that's not a big deal, but it's not brain swelling.
Right.
But because I didn't have somebody take my hand and say, bring her in, let's have a look at her together. Like, that would have gone a lot further, I think, than, you're just a first time mom. Like, it's,
And have your 2nd and 3rd children suffered any illnesses as a result of being not vaccinated?
No, thank goodness. We have a pretty high vaccination rate where I live. I also live in a pretty isolated community, so we don't have a lot of transient people coming in and out. So I've been protected by that. The other thing I will say that I'm embarrassed, but I like to lean into where I get things wrong. I like to lean into the discomfort and because that's how you grow. It's that discomfort. I missed my own son's autism. So in the anti-vax community, they tell you that vaccines cause autism and neurological problems. And they also talk about it in a very ableist way. And so here I am hearing these women just resentfully almost talk about their autistic children. There's a lot of like pedestal, like the vaccinated children are damaged and the unvaxxed pure child, like it's almost cult like, even in that, like cults have a lot of puritanical beliefs, and in anti-vax cult it's no different. And so they talk about like these damaged children that wreck your marriage, wreck your life, stress you out. And I have this perfect autistic child who makes me so happy. He's just different and he's beautiful. And I'm like naturally just accommodating to his differences because I love him. Like he's great. And he just needs to navigate a little differently, you know? And I missed my own child's autism because I had such an ableist view on what autism was.
Right.
And also, like, how could my child have autism? He's pure and unvaccinated, right?
Yeah.
And then when I came out of this, I was like, because I had a couple people tell me they thought my son was autistic in my family, and I was so offended. Like, how dare you say that about my child? And then as soon as I came around about vaccines, I just was sitting one day and I just felt the color drain from my face, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like I need to get him assessed. And then I took him to the family doctor and I told her my concerns, and she has an autistic son herself, and she's like, I can't give him a diagnosis right now, like he needs to see a specialist, but I'm telling you to brace yourself for a diagnosis. And he's got level 2 autistic spectrum disorder was what he was diagnosed under the DSM-5 with, and therapy has done nothing but open his world, and he has met every goal, and it's all evidence-based. And I'm not trying to cure him with bleach and strict diets. He's just like, I'm so glad I left that world before figuring out that my son was autistic, because it really worked out well for us.
So now I understand how you got into this entirely, and I'm very sympathetic, and you know, it's unfortunate that we have these encounters that give people this mistrust. And you know, it's kind of like we're talking about the whole democracy thing and right now, and this distrust in government and distrust in institutions, and you know, that's exactly what you experienced, and there you go. So so I guess the next question is how you got out of it. So what was the kind of procedure?
So a lot of the things that anti-vaxxers talk about are like, well, what can we attribute to the reduction of disease? And they'll say that sanitation had a much bigger part than any vaccine. And yet, in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of resistance to basic courtesies of like wearing a mask, washing your hands, like all the time, sanitizer. Like the same people that profess that sanitation was like the big reason, we're now like resisting other methods to control a virus. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like I thought we said that this was the reason, and now you guys are shirking this basic thing you can do. Like it doesn't make sense to me. My parents are from the former Yugoslavia. They also have a lot of distrust in the government, so I kind of grew up in that kind of home. But also knowing that governments can collapse. That's another thing I grew up knowing. So when everybody started losing their jobs and the economy started going bad and just things were really uncertain, I started thinking like, what if these diseases come back? What if I don't have a guarantee of healthcare? Like in Canada, we have basic healthcare that's free, you know, but like Venezuela, their system crumbled and measles came back, diphtheria came back. That's a fact. Like those things came back to Venezuela, a country that once had these diseases under control thanks to vaccination. Their healthcare system crumbled. These things came back, and I thought, don't I want my kids to have at least some basic protection against the old diseases? So I started looking
the old regime.
Yeah, right. So I started looking into that, and then I was like, well, when can I vaccinate my youngest? Because I really believe this one trope, like that the blood-brain barrier doesn't close or seal until like the age of 2 or 3. And I was like, well, which is it? Is it 2 or is it 3? Because he's 2. Like, which one is it? And I'm trying to like find this information, like realize I'm wrong. Like babies are born with an intact blood-brain barrier. And I had to concede that I was really wrong about that. And then I started thinking, okay, what else am I really wrong about? And that's when I finally started to step out of my echo chamber and look for answers that didn't come from anti-vax sources. And I really credit Dr. Iannelli out of Texas, made a website called Vaxopedia, where he dismantles every single trope, like every single one, with precision and references and just common sense. And so I spent hours on that. And that is how I gradually, my first appointment wasn't easy. I had to take an Ativan to get through my kid's first appointment because the anecdotes follow you, the horror stories still follow you, no matter how much logic and science you read. But after I saw that my kids were okay after their first shots, I caught them up in a year. So, yeah.
Wow. This is
Well,
amazing.
By the way, thanks for sharing, Lydia. I know that no matter how many times you've had this talk or gone to, talk shows and it's still like I can still hear your voice crack a few times and you're still reliving that trauma, reliving some sort of mom guilt and all that is powerful. But the cool thing is that you broke the cycle and now can inspire your kids to think critically, question themselves because, hey, mom got it wrong. Yeah, I got misinformed and it's easy to go down that. But what a great example that you fought through it and you figured out a way out. And that's also kudos to you too. If you carry the shame, you also should carry the credit, which is you now have realized this, been able to fix this luckily. And I think it's a great lesson for the kiddos. I think when you talk about breaking the cycle, I was a child of child abuse, a very severe physical and mental child abuse. And I swore to myself that I would never, touch my kids, never spank my kids. And I was very strict with that because I knew what that felt like to be hit with a water hose or a wooden object. Like there was many times where my dad would grab a wooden brush and lift me off the ground at age 3 and 4 and hit me so hard I could never catch my breath.
I tell my daughter
growing up as an angry adult, and broke that cycle. And I can tell you, in 30 years of parenting, I never once spanked any of my kids for that reason.
Yeah. I tell my daughter, one night I'm stirring dinner and I take out the wooden spoon and I said, do you know that this was a threat for me and my friends? Because I'm 40. So like I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Like parents used to like hang a belt up on the wall or like take the spoon out and like and she laughed. She's like, no. I was like, yes. And then some parents would brag about breaking the spoon over their kid's butt. She was just so like that idea was just so unreal to her that parents would do that openly, like to their children. Like, but that's how it used to be.
Well, I feel very badly about our chocolate shows now, but you'll have to go back.
Talked about that on the chocolate. Yeah,
we've had 2 chocolate shows. The chocolate in the Latinx community is anyway. You'll have to watch the show. We're going to take another quick break to talk about our next show. So please, we'll be back in about 30 seconds.
Hello, everybody. Hope you tune in to 2 Queers in a Truck. It comes on right after Coffee and Pan Dulce. Appreciate you always watching and being there for us. I hope we can entertain you and be in your homes or wherever you listen to us. We're also on Spotify and many other places where you receive your podcast shows. Thanks for listening. Bye. Have a great week.
Bye, boo-boo. Welcome back. And Barbara, what is this? I know you've been on our shows as well, and this is nothing like I thought. Meaning, I've had this vision of what an anti-vaxxer was and is. And that vision, admittedly, is more of a, you're not the boss of me. I don't know. I am being educated at this moment because not every anti-vaxxer, I mean, it's silly that I would even think that every anti-vaxxer is the same, but I don't know, Barbara, you have some anti-vaxxers in your family.
Yes.
And so do I. And you want to comment on anything before we go back to Dr. B? Or
well, I think my eyebrow went up when I hear that, she was a chemist for a pharmaceutical company. It intrigued me that you would leave your science-based background and become an anti-vaxxer. But that being said, I have a neighbor that's a nurse, and the only reason she got vaccinated is because her son said, "Mom, you cannot see the new baby unless you're vaccinated." And that is the only reason. And I'm like, you're a nurse. I just want to hit her. But it's entrenched. And I don't even go over there anymore because it's just so unpleasant. And the husband got COVID and he thinks he's protected forever. So it's painful. And it's totally disrupted our neighborhood, but it's a different place. But I'm glad you've changed and you're protecting yourself and your kids, and that makes me happy. So
yeah, I'm also a nursing student. I was actually, when I got the text about coming on the show, because I was like an hour off, I was studying health assessment and to take all the different heart rates. I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot. But yeah, I'm actually a nursing student. I hope to get into public health and my end goal is to be a nurse practitioner and provide primary care to my isolated community. And because we have a hard time keeping doctors, and at least I can refer out and prescribe simple things as a nurse practitioner. But yeah, that's my goal. And to talk to parents that are making these choices from a place of compassion and just having been there and and I'll say it's hard, I left the anti-vax group, and I'll have people, and some of them are genuinely wanting to know things about how I changed my mind, but some of them are very challenging, and they're not really talking to ask me anything. They're just commenting on my social media stuff to hear themselves talk and provide contrary, facts. And it can be hard to stay graceful. Like I've got a bit of a spicy side, and I can get a little bit snappy, and sometimes I'm not as graceful as I should. And I look back and I'm like, oops, I didn't keep my cool as much as I should have there. But, for the most part, you can tell.
Welcome to the crowd.
Yeah.
exactly. Sometimes you gotta let it rip and let them have it,
Yeah. I have a quick question for Dr. B, and then I don't know if Dr. B has any more questions, but Dr. B, hearing what she had to say about her experience going to see the doctor, I'm paraphrasing, and about how she was kind of talked to like a new mom kind of, is there any movement since we've gone through this pandemic that you are aware of or reading about from the physicians community, or I'm not even sure what term I'm using, from doctors, to really understand maybe someone like the experience she had? Because, like she mentioned, something so simple as, I have switched dentist because the person who checked me in did not pay attention to me. And I have done, Jenny, I know Jenny's got the bougie jokes coming on, but and the reason I love the doctor I have is because her receptionist, her nurse, and she listens to what I have to say. When I'm saying something, she's not writing. And that's the first time I've ever had a doctor do that. So is there a movement? Are you aware that is, since you're going to speak on behalf of all physicians and doctors?
No, I'm not aware of any kind of thing like that, and I doubt that there will be, because I think the immediate kind of reflex reaction in the medical community to someone who's anti-vaxxer is, oh, they've lost their minds. There's no hope for these people. They're all crazy. You know, you mentioned this tribalism of the folks that are now kind of pestering you because you've left the tribe, right? And that's threatening to them because they haven't quite done the work that you've done to get this insight. And what you did was I think profoundly unusual, that you really said, hey, there's a disconnect. I might have to admit that I'm wrong. That's extremely difficult for anybody to do, to admit that you're wrong, especially about something that is important to you as your children's health. And so, you know, once folks get in as you know, get in this situation, well, then they kind of have to defend themselves, defend their decision, and they just self-reinforce, as you said, kind of in this bubble. But back to your original question, no, I'm unaware. And unfortunately, the medical community is made up of you know, normal people with their own sets of prejudices and impatience and lack of empathy in too many cases. And these things happen, and it's unfortunate. I'm really sorry that you were kind of actually directed to this by medical personnel, because heavens, we have enough difficulty with people who don't believe in the vaccines, you know, without that. And so that just really kind of adds to it. And, you know, I mentioned earlier this mistrust in government. And I think this is maybe kind of part of it. I was reading something today that, you know, we haven't had this existential threat, just like right now people think, Jesus, we might have World War III. Let's focus. And we kind of hadn't had a horrible epidemic, you know, for 100 years or something. And so people have kind of forgotten how devastating infectious disease can be. And it's like, oh, medicine can kind of cure anything. So I think there's been kind of this, just like lack of trust in government and other institutions, including healthcare, so that they start hearing all this. And then there are these confusing messages with Trump and whatever. And so it was very easy to, for reasons other than yours, to kind of say, well, I ain't believing what they say because, you know, they lied to me about everything else. So no, I'm unaware of any movement in medicine to make communications more empathetic and accepting. But there should be. That's a terribly unfortunate
Heather and I
experience.
have done a few webinars for. One was for the Indiana Immunization Coalition out of their university. We did another one. I want to say Alabama, but I'm not sure. We've done a few university like webinars where we talk about addressing this.
And just to let people know, Heather Simpson is the other half of Back to Vax. So Heather is the person who was not able to join us, but she'll be joining us again, and we'll get that show on the schedule. But Heather is the other person who, and I think she is from Texas.
She is from Texas. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. I wanted to make sure we do a little bit of research, right, Jenny? I mean, we're not Joe Rogan.
We've got North America covered.
We mostly make it up as we go, but every once in a while.
I'm fitting right in then, because I just fly by the seat of my pants.
I'm joking.
But also too, I mean, you do have a really powerful Texas accent, Lydia. It's easy to confuse that. No, I'm just kidding. I've got a lot of friends that live in British Columbia, and we've done some different Zoom shows and stuff like that. And I mean, I can hear that Canadian accent. I love it. I think one of my
I'll
favorite.
hear myself sometimes on like little clips of things people have done. I'm like, I sound so Canadian.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But down here we love it. We love it.
That's
It's
right.
accent.
We have some Palatine and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like, but it's an amazing country actually, and just more beautiful people. But you know, I was going to address Christian's deal. First of all, you're a big old queen. That's why. It had nothing to do with
Hey, this is not the same.
You're a big old queen. I'll cover that in 2 queers in a truck.
That's right. Speaking of that, Jenny. Hey, Jenny, speaking of that, let's take our last break before we wind down the last 10 minutes of the show. And this next break will tell you about the show that comes on 30 minutes after this one, 2 queers in a trunk. So we'll be right with you. And this break will tell you about that show.
Next up, thanks for watching Coffee and Pan Dulce. Next up is 2 queers in a truck. Stay tuned.
All right, well, welcome back. So, Jenny, go ahead. We only got about 10 more minutes left, 10 or 11 minutes. So, go ahead.
So, I think it's interesting that you're going to go into the nursing field and studying to be a nurse. And do you think you would have gone into nursing
Here's another thing I don't understand. Okay, so I've always wanted to care for people. Like ever since I, went through all of the things, like I've almost died from sepsis with Crohn's disease. I've been really sick, like deathly ill. As a doctor, you would know, like having a abscessed bowel that, splits open and spills its contents is lethal sometimes, right? So I had that happen in my early 20s. It took me months to recover from that. And I've always admired what nurses do and wanted to be a nurse someday, but I couldn't do it having anti-vax views because there's a conflict there. Like morally, if I feel like I'm poisoning somebody with something, I cannot do that job, right? So I kind of put off my dreams of being a nurse, like ever, because of that kind of moral conflict. And so when nurses are anti-vax, it's very confusing to me, because how do you have a profession in evidence-based medicine, but like advocate against a marvel? Like antibiotics and vaccines have saved more lives than anything in the history of humankind. Like you are likely here because one of your descendants got vaccinated or took antibiotics. Like really.
Yeah.
So I don't understand.
And nor do I. And there have always, since the beginning of time, been physicians who don't believe in it. And during the COVID pandemic, I mean, you turn on Fox News every night. Laura Ingraham and these other yo-yos will have some off, what do you call them? Offbeat, doctor kind of saying, "Oh, you need to take hydroxychloroquine and all these things." And you had this Scott Atlas, is the advisor to Trump. Well, he's a radiologist, but nonetheless. So how these folks have these weird ideas is beyond me, but it's been that way since the beginning of time. And I understand that even back in the Spanish flu epidemic, there was not only just a strong anti-vax community there as well, and the polio, but, a bunch of doctors that stood up and say, no, we don't. So I don't know. It's a weird thing. And as you say, how can you be science-based and not believe that? Well, not everything in science is cut and dried, and there's disagreements and conflicts about things in all the sciences. And it just becomes, I think, more acute and emphatic when it involves health, right? Because that's life or death sometimes. We don't worry too much. Well, we're aware of the climate scientists' disagreement, that 1% that kind of say, oh, it's not real, and one thing or another. Well, the same goes on in astronomy and every other field, I imagine. There's
the other issue is our culture likes to stigmatize big pharma and taking medication. And I ran into that my whole life. I resisted treating my Crohn's disease even to the detriment of my own health. Tried strict diets only to get really ill and need hospital care.
Hey, Lydia, I was going to tell you something real quickly, because this is the first time someone has actually said this, and I have tried to say it, but I just never could explain it. I'm a progressive Democrat, and we have been fighting against big pharma, all this kind of stuff. We've been talking with big pharma. When the pandemic started, some libertarians, some even were on our show, were also against big pharma, but for different reasons. They took that and used it and convinced some actual progressive people that you're right, we got to be against big pharma because we said we were against pharma. No, and it was this manipulation of the reasons. And it was how they twisted it. When you said you're against big pharma, you said you're against my body, my choice. They stole that. They stole that as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was.
They'll hijack anything. The anti-vax community will take. Yes. I like to say it. They'll take whoever will have them. So they'll pander to whoever. They'll use race to pander to people. They'll use economics. They'll use why would they care about poor people? They just want poor people to stay sick. Like they'll say stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, pharma lobbies, I mean, they can really do some damage, right? Like they didn't really act on their best behavior all the time. But I also like to point out the reason that they get caught is because there are regulations. When you have the natural supplement industry is largely unregulated, how do you get caught breaking rules that don't exist? So they've tested natural products. Some of them have like pharmaceutical analogs from China, heavy metals. Like a lot of these products that people think are natural are so contaminated and not even what it says on the label. But because there's this lack of regulation, they never get caught. People have had liver failure from supplements. Like this is something that's happened. And they want to like sit there and say natural is better. Okay, but arsenic is natural too. So
Yeah.
you know, and I'm not saying that big pharma is perfect, but in terms of like vaccination, like this is a tool of medicine that's been around forever. It works, and I know, you know, COVID vaccinations may not be perfect in terms of other vaccines that are much better, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
We just need to hang
Lydia,
on.
So you said that you saw the light, you opened your mind, and you got all of your children COVID vaccinated. Is that right?
Yeah, except my youngest, who had COVID really bad.
Oh, really?
Really bad.
So, but I understand you still haven't given your second and third children the standard childhood vaccine.
Oh, no, they're vaccinated. They're all caught up. All three of my kids.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I misunderstood that.
So this was last, so I started vaccinating my kids, I think a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now.
You just didn't do it when they were infants.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's great. I wondered if there was a
they got
dissonance
caught up
there. Yeah.
12, 5, and 2 was when when I started vaccinating them.
Good for you.
Pasted in. I think we kind of jumped back and forth between some topics, but she'd said that over about a year period that she had caught them up, which we've covered a lot of ground here too. So there's definitely it's a pretty emotional subject too. You know, I think
it is. Yeah.
I think one thing that we can take from a lot of different subjects, because we were talking about veterans before we went on the show, and mental health. I think two things that we miss in this country and in Canada as well, and most Western democracies, is taking mental health serious and taking bedside manner and treating people with dignity in many industries, and not just the medical industry, but in many industries. Serious, whether it's customer service. Christian and I both have worked in the hospitality industry. And so many times people easily dismiss somebody as, oh, she's a new mom, or he doesn't know how to drive that car properly, or whatever, whatever.
He's just a hotel manager.
Yeah, just a hotel manager, and the big old queen. But anyway, but anyway, I think our society is so easy to dismiss people either because they feel rushed themselves or they haven't had proper training. And I think it really comes down to, we do not take mental health serious. That's why we have, veterans taking their own lives at 22 people a day. The transgender community has over a 41% suicide attempt in their lifetime. And that's actually low. That's just the ones that we know that they're actually out. It's probably actually in real numbers, 50%. I'm a suicide survivor myself. I'm a hate crime survivor and a child abuse survivor. And so I'm lucky to even be here. But it was because I invested into mental health. I've gone through 2 different series of mental health therapy, one for anger management in my 20s and one for transitioning starting in 2016. And I think so much so in industries and for future nurses is listening to people. And they want to be heard no matter how crazy they are, like Christian, but people want to feel validated. They want to feel loved, and they want to be cared for. And I think sometimes we need to take the time and say, if I was on the other side of that, how would I feel if I had a brand new baby? And the person answering the phone, whether it was a nurse or a doctor or whomever, just went, it's not that big of a deal. If you're really serious about it, come to the emergency room. If not, it's so flippant when you've got this special cargo and you're petrified, and there's no owner's manual for brand new babies. And that would build resentment in me too, And, so I think we need to address mental health more and the cares and needs of our society.
I can even say, in my wellness journey as well, you know, you hear about postpartum. That's another thing that's really overlooked, described as baby blues. After my third child, I developed severe postpartum with OCD and panic and everything. And you know, like I thought I had a brain tumor. Like my personality and thought pattern, like behavior changed so much. I was sure I was dying. Like there was something seriously wrong. I can't control anything. And it was so scary. And part of it was like, I had a bit of eating disorder because I had read so much about diets over the years that I could tell you what was poisonous about every single food. And so when every single food has an antitoxin or a toxin or something indigestible or whatever, like it's feeding the bad bacteria. Like there's so many different kooky things that people tell you about diet. Like food became an unsafe thing to me. And I'm nursing an infant and I can't even barely eat. I have no appetite because everything seems poisonous and I'm obsessing over everything. And I had severe postpartum, and I don't think anyone realized, like you just hear about baby blues, but like women can really go downhill after.
I can tell you, I know we got to start closing down real quickly, but and thank you so much for sharing with us, because this is teaching all of us, and especially those viewers of ours as well. In the Latinx community, Tejano, Latinx, Hispanic, Chicano, whatever term you use, in our communities, postpartum is a very stigmatized thing. My mom, when she had her fourth child, suffered from that for 2 years. And it was just considered, it was not taken very seriously. And so I appreciate, and as recovering misogynists, men, we don't realize that women go through this after they've had a baby. I know Jenny's
I didn't realize it. Like I had 2 children, and I felt a little emotional after the first 2, but the third one was so bad. I thought I must have had a brain tumor or something. Like I couldn't believe the severity.
Yes, ma'am. Listen, before we start closing up and letting everyone tell us where they're going to be, can you just remind us about your website and how people can get a hold of you, your social media outlets and those kind of things? Because I'm sure there are people who are going to be very anxious to contact you.
For some reason, Facebook doesn't let you use the word Vax in your group.
Oh.
In your page name. It doesn't want to, because that's how it's protecting you from misinformation. So I couldn't my public page is Back to the Facts, which is pretty catchy.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then our private group is named Back to the Vax, VAX. That's on Facebook as well. You can find me on Twitter at former Anti-Vax. That's my handle. Our website is backtothevax.com. It has links to like some articles we've written, and
you guys have a podcast, right?
And we have a podcast,
Okay.
Called Back to the Vax, a journey back to evidence-based medicine.
So let me ask, what have you found has been most effective in getting people to open their minds? Because as I say, most people are so tight in, and most people are probably not as intelligent and as persistent as you were to really get in and dig into this. Most people are happy.
Help people to challenge one. So what an anti-vaxxer likes to do when they're confronted is just throw a million things at the wall, see what sticks, and then run away. So it's called a Gish Gallop, or there's different debate techniques that they call it. I have an article where I dissect how they like to debate people while feeling they won while being wrong, horribly wrong at the same time. I would say if somebody comes to you, one thing, address one trope, right? Like, don't let them bring up more than one issue with vaccines. Address it one at a time. Usually there are things that are incontrovertibly true. Like the blood-brain barrier is mature at birth. Aluminum does not cross the brain from vaccination. That is environmental aluminum that they find. So these studies that they use to prove their points actually don't prove their points at all. So this study they'll share, well, they found, aluminum in the brains of 12 autistic people. Okay, but they didn't check the brains of regular people in that study. They didn't account for whether it was environmental or where that aluminum came from. we are exposed to aluminum every day in our diet,
Sure.
every day, right? So just one little myth, address it. Don't let them bring up anything more than one, because then that's how they take it off the track or move the goalpost or whataboutism or whatever. You have to just address it one myth at a time, and that it can take time, you know, because it's very psychologically uncomfortable to be wrong.
Exactly.
And so it took me months to even make that call. It took me months, like I couldn't sleep. Like I had a hard time sleeping leading up to that appointment. Like it's so it is a very psychologically difficult process to go through when you're leaving any kind of groupthink cult that, you know, is all a big part of your life, your lifestyle. Yeah, so that's I'd say take it one myth at a time.
Well, Lydia,
and so what I know it's impossible to track this thoroughly, but do you have a sense of how many folks you've been able to bring out of the cult with you? Or
I have 200 people in my group, which we have 200 parents that we support each other. So it's a private group. We give each other a safe space. We only recommend evidence-based practice. People will sometimes start slowly, but it is not because they think an alternative schedule is better. It's purely out of anxiety. So I get that. So even in your own practice, maybe if you find a patient that's like scared, okay, let's try one vaccine, because sometimes just seeing their child do well with one vaccine is enough to go, oh, that wasn't so bad, you know, and just say, listen, if you're worried, like you don't underestimate the anxiety these parents are feeling when they are bringing their children in for those first vaccinations. Give them an email, say, if anything goes wrong, email me, I'll talk to you. Like that, just having that lifeline, that support through those first vaccinations is so important.
Wow. This has been probably one of our most educational shows we've had.
For sure.
I would say in 3 years. Thank you so much. And we do need to wrap this up, and we would love to have you back.
Lydia, stay brave.
Yes, wonderful. And you know, if we need to change April or May schedule, I'm sure Jenny would not disagree. We need to have you get back with Heather as well.
I love working with Heather. Important. I was disappointed she couldn't make it today, but.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, thank you all for being, you know, on this as well. And so with that said, let's go around the Brady Bunch screen and tell us who you're going to be in 30 seconds or less. And then we will end the show. Thank you once again for those who are following us and joining us. And let's go, let's say Dr. B, Jenny, Barbara, and then Lydia, 30 seconds or less.
I'm just going to be tooling around Charlotte. I was out of town, as I told you last week, to go speak to this medical group in Houston. So that was our first road trip in a couple of years, I suppose. I'm going to be here just doing the usual thing and trying to advocate more for Medicare for all. Well, thank you.
Well, I am going to be on your screens again in about 20 to 30 minutes as to where my truck drops. And then happy, joy. And then on this coming Sunday, we have another Stonewall Esports event at Bar Oregon. If you're in the local Charlotte area and you want to come to a free fun event, and we have a raffle for Hamilton tickets. Ooh. So you do have to be there to win. So you can't just register for the raffle and duck out. You do have to be there at least through halftime. And so we do have a esports tournament or video gaming tournament, free to join in, free to come out. And we also have the raffle for the Hamilton tickets, which are very expensive, and you can get to have a chance at winning two tickets for Hamilton. So we're super excited about that.
Excellent.
Well, I'm going to be going Tuesday, Thursday up to my friends in Winston-Salem. We're going backwards again. They are really committed, and then they're not. So I just kind of hang in there and keep trying to get them organized, but we'll see. And we've had a death in our neighborhood, so also be attending a funeral this week. So, but she's at peace and at rest, and God bless her.
Well, I'm going to be studying. I'm going to go through my first lab. So I've been doing all my studies at home up until this point. I'm doing health assessment. So I'll be practicing all these skills that I'm trying to learn now. This is probably the hardest course I've taken because it's just so intensive, like all the body systems, the different lung sounds, the different heart sounds, the different arteries, the different cranial nerves. Oh my gosh, that is so hard.
Dr. B.
Oh, it's fun. Cranial nerves are great. I was
Oh
lecturing about
man,
cranial
I
nerves today.
did really poorly
Cranial
on
nerves
that
are
part.
great. Oh, love cranial nerves.
Oh man, that was the worst. But yeah, that's what I'll be doing is studying and raising my
Good for you.
kids.
Yeah.
Excellent.
You.
Well, I will be at a sports bar near you wearing this when I walk in here in Charlotte because March Madness has started. The NCAA brackets are out. They came out this week, and my TCU Horned Frogs are in the NCAA championship basketball tournament. They'll probably go one round, but at least they made it. So I'm very, very excited. Davidson College, I think, is also in it if you're from the Charlotte region. But almost every school is in it.
Be prepared for Duke to just go one round too. This is looking
Oh,
like
you
a
think
iffy year
so?
for them.
Oh, well.
Yeah, it's
Well, yeah, we'll see
a
what
little
happens.
dodgy.
That's right. And so, as Jenny said, about 30 minutes from this show on Wednesday, we'll drop our second show, which is Two Queers in a Truck, which she leads. And please join us for that one as well. And with that said, we're going to say goodbye. And please stay on if you don't mind, so we can do a very, very brief promo. And we will say goodbye to whatever music comes on with the magic of technology.
Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very
Thanks for
good.
having me. Thanks to the LatinX community for listening to what I have to say. And yeah.
Happy
Excellent. Thank
study. Ugh.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining in and watching us and our view of what makes us great. And we appreciate you. We had a record viewership last week, so enjoy the show.
Yes. Bye, y'all. See you next week.
Up next is Two Queers in a Truck with Jenny and Christian. And hope you guys tune in. We'll see you in about 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you. Bye.